The House of Lost Souls. There are secrets we would rather never uncover. Stories that, if heard, could derail the course of our sanity. And that is precisely what happened to Clara, a young architect with a free spirit but deeply scarred by the recent loss of her parents. The year was 1969. Clara had received an unusual request to evaluate an abandoned mansion in the countryside for a potential restoration. The contractor, a lawyer named Victor Crane, had been vague on details but insisted the property held great historical value. Driven by curiosity and the promise of a generous payment, Clara set off for the heart of a region forgotten by modernity, where the roads were flanked by ancient trees that seemed to whisper secrets of times past. As Clara drove, the environment around her became increasingly isolated. The wind blew gently, causing the leaves of the trees to dance in a silent choreography, as if they were trying to communicate something to her. The shadows cast by the treetops stretched and shortened, creating shapes that seemed to move independently, as if they were alive. Clara felt a shiver run down her spine, but she attributed it to the excitement of the adventure that awaited her. As she approached the mansion, the landscape grew darker. The dirt road, covered with a layer of dry leaves, crackled under the tires of her car, echoing like a distant lament. The mansion, an imposing structure, loomed atop a hill, shrouded in a dense fog that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. The mist obscured the outlines of the building, revealing only glimpses of Gothic spires and shadowed windows that appeared to watch her arrival. The mansion loomed atop a hill, shrouded in a mist that not only obscured its form but seemed alive, pulsating and rippling as if it breathed. The fog veiled details like a macabre curtain, revealing only glimpses of Gothic spires and shadowed windows that hinted at unspeakable secrets. The iron gates, overgrown with thick ivy and corroded by the rust of time, were not mere entrances, but weary sentinels guarding something that should never be disturbed. The wind carried whispers, indistinct ancient words lost in the mist. As Clara walked the long stone path, the feeling of isolation was overwhelming. But there was something more, something indefinable pressing on her chest. It wasn't just the heavy atmosphere. It was as if unseen eyes were watching, scrutinizing her every step with silent judgment. The mansion wasn't just an imposing structure. It felt alive, a vigilant entity whose walls hid dark memories. Every stone on the path was cold and damp, as if the earth had absorbed repeated tragedies into its core. Clara felt a weight, an almost supernatural resistance with every movement, as though the very air conspired to stop her from reaching the truth that awaited her within those sinister walls. When the main door creaked open with a guttural groan, Clara was immediately swallowed by a dense shadow, almost tangible, as if the darkness carried the weight of centuries of untold stories. The architecture revealed a past grandeur, majestic columns and intricate arabesques. But these details were now obscured by decay and a shroud of dust that clung like a deathly veil. The air was heavy, saturated with the smell of mold and aged wood, mixed with something more disturbing and indefinable, a subtle floral aroma lingering like a ghost. Thick, dark curtains seemed to absorb any light that tried to enter, creating an oppressive atmosphere. The wooden floors, covered in boards that groaned like laments, whispered warnings beneath Clara's every step. And then she saw them. Dolls. Dozens, perhaps hundreds, scattered throughout the house. They sat on chairs, lined shelves, and some were carefully placed on tables. Each one was unique, but all were deeply unsettling. Their glass eyes glinted in the dim light, capturing fragments of illumination like small, haunted beacons. It seemed impossible, but Clara felt they were watching her. Some dolls were in perfect condition, with intricate details in their lace and satin dresses, but others bore deep cracks in their faces, as if carrying scars from a dark past. One doll in particular had a gaze so piercing that Clara turned away, her heart racing in response. It was as if each doll contained a story, tragedies, secrets, or something even more unspeakable, stories that Clara instinctively knew she should never attempt to uncover. Clara tried to ignore the growing discomfort in her chest. She convinced herself it was merely an eccentric collection, perhaps from a former resident. However, as she walked through the main hall, she heard a noise. A brief, cold sigh. She stopped immediately, holding her breath, her eyes scanning the room for an explanation. But everything remained still, except for the mounting sensation of being watched. The silence was deafening, as if the house were holding its breath along with her. The contract required her to spend at least one night in the mansion to understand its structure. Reluctantly, Clara agreed. She set up camp in one of the second-floor bedrooms, where she found a fireplace that, although unused for years, still emitted a faint smell of soot, as if it had been recently lit. While exploring the room, she discovered an armchair covered with a dusty blanket, and beside it, a doll in perfect condition. That night, Clara was awakened by a distant sound, a noise that made no sense, the faint laughter of a child echoing through the dark halls, mixed with what sounded like the shuffle of bare feet on wooden floors. She hesitated, but something compelled her to investigate, as if she were incapable of resisting. With a flashlight in hand, she descended the stairs, following the sound that seemed closer, almost inside her. In the main hall, the doll's eyes seemed more alive, their reflections shimmering like tiny beacons in the darkness. And then she saw it. A doll that had been on a shelf earlier was now in the middle of the room. Clara froze. Her mind struggled to find a rational explanation, but instinct screamed at her to run. As she tried to return to the bedroom, Clara felt a nearly imperceptible shift in the atmosphere, as if the very air were conspiring against her. The corridors, once merely long, now seemed infinite, curving in impossible directions as the walls pulsed faintly, as if the house itself were alive. Shadows stretched, forming shapes that defied logic, almost like faces disappearing at the edge of her vision. And then there was the sound. Soft footsteps, but not human. With her heart pounding, Clara finally reached the bedroom door. It was slightly ajar, but seemed more like a hungry mouth than a simple entrance. Inside, the red-dressed doll sat in the armchair, but its posture had changed. Its hands, previously resting peacefully, now held a crumpled piece of paper, stained with something dark that wasn't just dirt. Its face, once delicately tilted to the side, now faced the door directly, as if waiting for Clara. The glass eyes reflected something that wasn't light, something alive, pulsing, and profoundly wrong. With trembling hands, Clara took the paper, feeling an odd resistance, as if the object itself didn't want to be touched. The message was written in a tortured script, each letter carved with rage or despair, almost as if the words were a silent scream. They don't like intruders. Clara fled the mansion that night, leaving behind her belongings and any desire to complete the assessment. When she tried to contact the lawyer who had commissioned the work, she discovered that no Victor Crane existed. It was as if everything had been a trap, a story crafted by a force far darker than she could ever comprehend. Today, Clara lives far from cities, far from any old buildings, seeking solace in the quiet embrace of nature. Yet even in her isolation, she cannot escape the weight of those glass eyes watching her, a constant reminder of the horrors she encountered. The memories cling to her like a shadow, refusing to fade into the background of her life. On nights of absolute silence, when the world outside her window is still, the sound of children's laughter echoes in her mind, a haunting melody that sends shivers down her spine. It is a sound that should evoke joy, yet it fills her with dread, twisting her stomach into knots. She often finds herself questioning her sanity, wondering if the experiences she endured were real or mere figments of a troubled mind. Was it truly the laughter of children she heard, or was it a cruel trick played by her own psyche? The dolls, with their glassy eyes and unsettling smiles, seemed to come alive in her thoughts, their stories intertwining with her own. And the question that haunts her every night, what if she hadn't made it out?